Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. This is going to be the introduction to the 200th edition of the Journey series. But also, I'm going to put this video up in my Sittings Preparing for Death playlist on Gratefullness Meditation channel. So, I got a message from somebody who recently had a loved one who passed, a sister, I think. I'll have to reread the comment here. The person writes to me, I know you don't take requests and truly respect that, but I hope you'll hear me out. I don't send requests like this, so please don't roast me. I've been a loyal member for the channel since 2015, and your content has helped me through some difficult times. This is, let me read the rest of it. I'll comment on the first part. I lost my younger sister to turbo cancer this Sunday, and I'm shattered. I remember you once shared a video about what happens after we leave life. It brought me comfort back then, and I believe it could change my perspective. If there's a chance you could republish the video or let me know where to find it on the members channel, I'd be so grateful, and thank you for everything you do for us. And then the person signed their name. So this appears to be a young woman, like a young mom, and 20s, maybe 30. It's hard for me to judge things like that, but definitely early 30s, late 20s, maybe. So her younger sister was probably, early 20s or something, mid 20s, I don't know. So, that's obviously hard for people to take things like that. Here's the thing about it. For the first part, people on the members channel, I want to do more things for, in terms, especially old videos. Like I have a lot of old videos that sometimes, like somebody talked to me about the Just the Mom video, which a lot of people, I thought the video was long. It was only 20 minutes long. I was surprised, but I had a number of people say that, moms say they really loved that video. And there was some other video I made, I don't know, about something, like maybe it was, I can't remember the video, but it was a video that people really wanted to have on the members channel. Like I had to make all these videos I had private because YouTube was going crazy with their community guidelines stuff. So I thought I could put those things back up on the member channel and they could watch them and see if there's anything they thought was community guidelines. Of course, now YouTube has really loosened up on all that shit. So, so people in the membership, I actually made a video saying if you guys have videos you want me to put up, but you need to remember the title because I don't remember them. Like I have a vague memory of this video this young woman is talking about here. But the other piece is, I say, in terms of requests, there are people that will constantly badger you for more. And this goes back to the old days with Master Chargy. Like Chargy said in that one video, he was talking about all his inner circle people being horrible. But he said there are people who are less pushy, right? Like there are people constantly trying to go in and spend time with Master Chargy, and you have to have like security in a sense, like volunteer people. And in India, I guess they hired some people after a while, but they had to have some security because people were, they pushed their way in, and there are just some people who are, very demanding and, don't respect your personal privacy or, your efforts. And they just want more and more and more. There's people who just are takers, and there's lots of people like that. And, even if there's just a few. And so that's what I talk about here. But someone like this is, people who are hesitant, people don't, don't want to bother me, just like the people who didn't want to bother Chargy or, the other masters, list, don't want to burden them with more stuff, which is, there are a lot of people like that. And so, like, I don't mind when people are asking for things I've already created and are useful for them, like an old video. It's just for me, I can't remember them. Like my computer has 4 terabytes, and I have just 1 year I produced 4 terabytes of videos. And Apple Cloud only holds 2 terabytes, so that's a whole thing. And everything gets saved onto the cloud. So I have to, after a while, I have to put everything on external hard drives. And then, so I do that based in year. So for me to find, sometimes external hard drives don't really work with search. They don't, it sucks. So I can't even say, so, I have all that stuff, but I don't know what I'm going to do with it. Like, if it's not on YouTube, then it's hard for me to find or republish if I don't have the exact name of the thing. It's, you know, I just found a video called Preparing for Death that I put on the members channel. It was a part of a journey series, and it's also already a part of the playlist on the Gratefullness meditation. But I thought I would talk about death here. I've been thinking about it a lot anyway, personally, and it's hard for me to recreate exactly what I said in the other videos, but some things are just based on, knowledge that I have that's, always there. And so the person, let me just reread this. I think they asked about what happens at the time of death after we leave this life. So, the soul it leaves the body. I talked about seeing my grandfather. It was the first time I saw a dead body, and I was like, he's not there anymore. The soul leaves the body. In India, they burn the body because in some cases the soul just hangs around the body because it doesn't know where to go, or doesn't, it isn't connected. I mean, you have to have some sort of connection to the etheric part of your where your soul resides. Your soul resides in the etheric world, but it's in your body, it's trapped in your body, but it leaves like during dreams and things like this. When you disassociate, things like that. Like your soul can be in two things. Like your soul withdraws into it has to still be in your body to keep your body living. But it doesn't exist in your body. Like it's not, it can be in the third dimensional world, and it can be somewhere else, right? So, and that's wherever it is. It's, wherever its placement is. And, in India, they burn the body for this reason, so that the soul doesn't hang around the body. And you're only supposed to grieve for some period of time, because your soul will also hang around loved ones. The soul comes into the sphere of the mother before the mom gets pregnant. So the soul is around. And I had to experience that with my daughter Anna. We had this kind of moment where we felt Anna's presence, my ex, and the kids that were there at the time. That she was the soul was already there. So the soul chooses the parents and hangs around the parents and is a part of the conception, because it has to be. There's no conception without a soul. That's the way we talk about abortion being murder, that a soul is there actually before the conception and drives there becomes a need for, a situation where the, soul can be born. So all the circumstances that surround, you have souls that are part of your spiritual support team that are, in the etheric world, and they are watching over you, like the people think about guardian angels. And the more developed you are as a spiritual person, the more important your work is. If you're going to do work for God, the more that there's a spiritual support team. And I'll get into that more as we go through this. And so if you have a baby soul that's around you as a mom, and then you have this biological need to be a mom, and you're feeling that you want to nest, these things. When the women get into the nesting, this kind of thing. And then there's the physical sex drive and all those things, that go with that. And so you have women who have the souls that are around them, and it attracts, the father to the situation, right? there's more than just the sex drive in these things. There's a spiritual aspect to it where there's a soul waiting to incarnate, right? So it's a very powerful force. And that's why when people are in this time of reproducing, they get along better. They're the creative energy is very enticing, on all levels. And so it drives the soul to be, have a place to incarnate. And that's why when that isn't present, there's often a disconnect between the mom and the dad, the couple, the husband and wife, because there's a lot that goes into the creation of a child. There's all that energy, right? And then there's all the energy that surrounds it. Like people are like all, the newborn baby, and how you feel with the woman when she's pregnant. It's like all that goes into a wedding. These things, and there's all that energy, and there's support from the external support and spiritual support for it. And then it just disappears, and then you got a little toddler running around, fucking messing everything. Like you have all that, and the whole thing, so it becomes. And sometimes it's okay for people. The birth process is very intense, and the people who are introverted, it's like, well, I'm glad that the circus kind of that surrounds that, but there's a lot of energy, a lot of support at that, those various times on a spiritual level and a material level. But then the soul is creating the body, right? It's manifesting. It's some scaric pattern, and it's everything it has to do with its life. It's future life, and it's who it's going to be as a person, characteristics it needs physically. I mean, all these things are calculated at a lot of levels. This soul plan, and so a lot of these things can't be known because you can have a past life memory and you can understand the death process. And there's people who are psychic, and so there's some general understanding. But, it's not like, there's people who have out-of-body experiences, or they die and they come, they're almost like a resurrection type of thing. There's some reports about this, but, you're never going to fully understand what happens on the spiritual world. Even a spiritual master who has, insight and experiences and a consciousness that's on a higher level and knows a lot more about these things. Somebody who's a saint or evolved soul, there's just some things you'll never know until you die, like you go through this process. But if you've gone through it before, there's, and you're prepared for it if you're meditating and you're connected to the divinity within you. And so as you enter into the death process, there is, the people around you feel connected. And that's why you're supposed to pray that the soul goes to the highest level. That the soul is, reaches its highest level and has, some cases, in most cases, a good rebirth. Like they're in a good situation. They're following life, right? So, that's in terms of loved ones. As much as you really want to hang on, and you can feel the soul's presence. I mean, people who really, love who's a loved one, the soul will hang around for a little bit, but then it has to go wherever it needs to go. And in some cases, it would be on a level of, etheric level that would be hard to come back to Earth. I mean, in terms of, or it's reincarnates into another person, and so it's the soul can't hang around where it was, like especially how quickly the soul reincarnates into somebody else. The more spiritually evolved you are, the more time there is between lives where you can prepare for it, right? There was a guy who wrote a book, and there was videos of this on YouTube, and I don't remember the name of it. But a lot of people in the Sahaj Marg's mission were reading the book or were listening to the interviews. And Charji confirms something about it. Like, this is accurate. I mean, there's something there. I can't remember the specifics. But what this guy did was he went and he interviewed a variety of mediums. And, I saw this, there was a YouTube channel where this guy, he had a New York accent, and he talked about death. Like, he had people he interviewed that were, the death process quite a bit. And so he had a whole YouTube channel devoted to this. and he interviewed this guy, I think twice, and the book probably had the word soul in it, journey. I can't remember. I mean, it's a little bit of a vague memory. But what the guy said was he talked to all these psychics, real mediums, like not goofy, scammers, but like people who are considered legitimate mediums, and they all said the same kind of thing. That when the soul dies, you go into like what is like a almost like a let's call it a room. It can't, obviously there's no physical structure, but it goes into a place where there are other souls around it, and it kind of like relives its life, like the essence of you don't have a mind like we have here, so it's not like necessarily memories, but it's like a review of your success and failures. This stuff that your soul did, and that you did as a person, that helped you. You come in with a samskaric package. These things that are these impressions that you have to work off. And there are some things that will be like, you're some scars for having children. You have marriage, some scars. You have, the kind of marriage you're going to have, and, the kind of, things you have to get out of it, the struggles that you have. Let's say your spouse gets like a disease. Like I had a viewer whose husband developed some kind of like Alzheimer's at an early age. Like she's, I think maybe a little bit younger than I am, but probably in her 50s. And maybe 10 or 15 years ago, her husband started to break down mentally, where he can't function. And she's remained, like, she could have divorced him and any of these things, right? But it's remained, it's a difficult situation, like getting nothing out of that relationship, right? There's people who that's what they have in their marriage. They might have a happy marriage, and then all of a sudden somebody develops MS or something like something like that, right? So those are some scars. Like those are things that you're going to have to deal with in your life, like if you're an alcoholic and things. And so there's kind of a review of your successes and failures, and then what you have to work on. And you have this spiritual support team. Sometimes you're a soul in that team that's supporting somebody living here. And sometimes you're, incarnated, and, there's people who have these soul families. And then after whatever period of time of review, the soul reincarnates, and then there's this, group of souls that are around it and, supporting it in these endeavors. Because, once your soul goes into a body, you develop an ego and you start making choices, and then get off your soul's path and stuff I talk about quite a bit. So there's a pivotal time, when my daughter died, and there was this thing that Daji had said, which of course he's, not somebody I respect anymore and have any faith in what he said, but maybe it wasn't him, I don't know. Maybe somehow that you donate money to, like, for feeding kids or feeding people, to the poor, and you say these prayers, and I had, people do that on the channel with me because that was sort of my community. And the prayer that you most wanted, I mean the energy you most want to send to the recently dead person is that the energy has to be, for them to have a good next life, like what's going to happen to them in the future. And there's maybe a connection that'll be there in the future with you, like these souls that are, it depends on how close you are to your family. Like I don't feel all that close to my other family members. I say my brother had a big influence on me. My sisters did when I was younger. There's a big age gap between me and my next sibling. It was 10 years. And there's a couple of miscarriages before and after I was born. And so there was all this stuff. It was an Irish Catholic mom and an Italian Catholic dad. And there was no birth control being used, these things. So, we had I had 3 sisters and 1 brother. And, my family, there's definitely some sort of connection with them, like some past life connection. Master Charji said, you can't have a conversation of longer of 3 minutes if there's no past life connection. So there's something there. But it's not like I don't, really, whenever I see my family, it's great for about an hour or so. And then it just feels, oh, this is, I'm like, oh, I should do this more often. And then after about an hour, I'm like, oh yeah, this is why I don't spend time with them. It's not anything that they do. It's not necessarily who they are as people. That's part of it. And I understand why people don't like me because of my time with my family, because they're, we're similar. We have things in common and whatever. But it's just it's not somebody people I could have everyday contact with. And it just brings me back to a time where it was, it's not a good time for me because it wasn't a good family. My parents were, incompetent and, whatever. And so, the connection there's some kind of past life connection, but it isn't, I wouldn't consider them part of my soul family, right? My nephews listened to some of my videos at one point. My brother didn't. And none of my family, they're not, I mean, none of these things would, we don't have a lot in common or whatever. So, I'll be sad when I hear that, they die or whatever. I don't, but my brother and I have lost contact. He's still part of the dodgy cult thing. And so, and, for other reasons. And so, for me, that isn't a big deal. Like it is, it depends on how close you are to people. Like some people are just, some of their soulmates are their relatives, like in some ways. They're really close to their mom or their dad or their sister or brother. And, they're just, they talk all the time. And, it's a different level of relationship. There's something to be said for people who understand what it was like to grow up in a family. Like a family is very specific, and you went through that with your kid, your siblings, and the people in your from your childhood, and that's a unique part of your experience, and so much of your development is there. So there's also attachment with those kind of things. But the practice, we don't have rituals the way we should. A funeral is not a good ritual. A wake is not a good ritual. And now, of course, people get cremated, and some people, buried, gravestone, But I knew from my grandfather that his corpse was not him. Like I was 10 years old, 11 years old. I'm looking at my grandfather, and they had put lipstick on him, and my grandfather was in 2 world wars, and he was, a real tough guy kind of guy, and there's no way, I mean, he would wear lipstick. Like that was, his lips were blue, and they put like fucking shitty lipstick over it, but you could see his lips were blue. And I'm looking at him going, like, why are we even doing this? Like, he's not here. The whole thing. And I mean, these guys came in, they were drunk from the American Legion. There's a bar I later would go to that was these American Legion guys, these vets would hang out. And my grandfather had those guys, and they showed up in their uniforms, and they were like drunk. It was like the whole thing. My dad said I started laughing, but, my grandfather's soul wasn't there, right? And so going to a gravestone, people put these things on the side of the highway. That's, people have to do what they have to do to cope. But they're not in their body anymore. And so you still have a relationship with the soul. Like if you're close to the soul, it's part of your soul family. And you might feel their presence. You might have dreams with them in it. You might have any number of things. But, the best thing that you can do is that, you go through the grieving process, which is necessary for you, and I'm sure the soul to whatever extent. And then the soul has to be allowed to leave, right? You have to pray for the soul to go on its way and, get the best possible situation for it. And those prayers are helpful, praying and thinking about it like this. And, I'm sending good intentions towards it, right? The thing, Master Charge, the third master of the Sahaj Marg system, his mom died in childbirth. The baby died a couple years later. He had a younger sister, so he was the oldest. He had 2 younger brothers, and his mother, who was the Lakshmi, the feminine wealth, when the mother, this goddess of this goddess Lakshmi, who represents the wealth of the family, and she was viewed as that. Sometimes, they want, a lot of time they want boys more than girls. And a lot of these cultures value boy children more than women. But, sometimes there's somebody born in a family and everyone's like, oh, that's just a gift from God. And that's how his maternal family felt about his mom. And when she died, the whole family fell apart. And she was a Brahmin, and they did these ritualistic bathing. Like they have to bathe every morning away. It's it's like early in the fucking morning, and there's a whole ritual there. And Chargy wrote a book called Down Memory Lane about his mom, and she gave birth and then went and bathed in cold water. So, they don't have these they did these like bucket baths. I mean, it's a whole different thing. But she got a chill and she just was sick from there out and then died. And he blamed it on this ritual. At least thought it was partially responsible for it. And he was like 5 years old and grew up without a mom, and it was a thing. And Babaji, in giving him a sitting, had his mom transmit to him, and he felt his mom's energy. So this is years later. So this is probably when he's 30 or 40 years old. Probably in his late 30s or early 40s. And then after this woman came, the medium, and these whispers of the brighter world, his mom gave some messages, but Babji said she needs to go on her way. Like after giving the sitting, like she can't hang around. It's this is she has her own path to go on, probably maybe reincarnated in the mission or something like this. And there's situations where your mom or dad can reincarnate and be a younger person that you meet later on, like these things, whatever it is. So there's all that process. So it's the idea that there's some sort of, if there's connectivity there, then you'll meet the soul again. So that's it's only it's a illusion, because third dimensional life is an illusion of separation, because souls that are in your soul family that you have a longer lifespan. We have a etheric life with, and it's not just here, it's wherever your soul goes afterwards, or when you reincarnate in. These souls that like let's say Jesus and the his disciples, they were also around maybe Krishna and his people, like what I mean. There's these souls that come down to do spiritual work, and they come down in a group, and they often incarnate doing the same things. And so if you look through the history of spirituality, Master Charji and Babaji were, Babaji was Patanjali. He was the father of modern, the Ashtanga Yoga. And Charji was his disciple in that life. And there's a lot of people who were around this guy, Swami Vivekananda, and Ramakrishna. There's a Ramakrishna, movement, and his, it's a spiritual movement. And Swami Vivekananda was part of Sahaj Marg, even though he never was a part in physical life. As a soul, he incarnated, gives lots of messages to the medium. And there are a lot of souls that are from the Mahabharata that are here in this Sahaj Marg, meditation. Like I had a past life memory and experience of being one of those characters. Master Charji was also St. Paul, with Jesus and, the Christianity. So, these things are, I mean, you look at it like that, there's maybe multiple lives with people. I've had these experiences where I'm talking to somebody, when we used to go to gatherings, there'd be people you'd meet and you'd have a very intense experience with. There was a Russian girl that, it was just like, we weren't like dating or anything like that. There was no, but we spent time together, and it was like I went through a bad marriage with her in like 2 weeks. Like, it was just, there's maybe some unresolved stuff there, right? And there's people that you would meet at a gathering, you feel like you've known them your whole life. There was a nice girl from Germany that sort of became a member of our family. And her mom had died when she was younger. And she was just a, very upbeat person. And she was just, hanging out with the whole family in India. And, we only knew her like 2 weeks. And I felt really sad when she left. And I knew there was a past life reason. Like there's some thing that happened, like some grief came up, like almost like, someone who had died in a past life, and I had experienced some grief from it, right? And then, I haven't talked to her since. Like it's, it just goes, like it's a thing that's just there. But you'll meet people. Back when we used to have gatherings and people go to India, you'd meet people from some other country, and you'd have these conversations, and you feel like a, strong connection with the person, and then you never see them again, right? So, so there's these things, and when it'll happen one way or another for people. And if there's a deep connection you have with somebody, then it's, whatever. There's no death is illusionary because your soul can go anywhere, right? Your soul is not bound by laws of time and space and physical distance and things. And there's just souls that hang out together. Like there's these, like I said, soul families, and you can see it. And there's people that you have no connection with whatsoever. They're like NPCs to you. Like the majority of people are like NPCs, where you have these short interactions and there's no connection, there's no depth. I mean, the people who listen to my videos, I assume there's some past life thing, right? The people that stick around or whatever, there's some that feel some sort of connection because there's just that, right? And past life just doesn't mean just physical, your earthly existence. It means that your soul has some sort of connection with that soul somewhere else or as well or whatever. So anyways, I think that's about it. I don't know what else I would have said in the other video. There's one more thing here. There's a few more things, I guess. People give up. People will die. Like people will have they're just waiting to die. Like you'll meet people or you'll see people in your life that just, life kicks the shit out of them, or they're just, they're so off track, or they've kind of just given up. There's lots of people like that. They're walking around like zombies, like like ghouls that are their life force has been drained out of them by whatever it might be. They might have a fear of death, like everybody has, and and they don't know what to do, and they're not necessarily suicidal, but they're just empty. Like they just don't have a goal. They're just lost, and their prana is depleted, and so they're ready to go. I fell out of off a zip line when I was a kid, and when I did the Vedic astrology, or maybe I took that spiritual class with that woman who's a psychic, maybe both, talked about that event as being an exit point, right? Like you have these early exit points that are given to you, and your soul can be like, all right, this isn't working out, I'm done. If things are not panning out, you're going in the wrong direction. So it's a choice point. So you have your destined date, your date to die, and then you have early release, like in case things are going south, where people might have something like that. Of course, I was in a Rahu period at that time. I talked about that in my Vedic astrology reading, which is a time where stuff like that happens. So I fell off a tree, was knocked unconscious, started getting migraine headaches after that. And my dad found me, and my mom was in Florida, so there's a whole thing. But I woke up in the hospital, and my sister said that I was rude, like my older sister. And I was like, I don't remember talking to you. Like, I had, for 12 hours, I was gone. Like, and I might have been awake, but I was, I had a concussion. And, my dad was the worst person. Like, he freaked the fuck out. And, he was, like, when I woke up, he was so freaked out. And I was like, it's the only time I felt like my dad loved me, like, in terms of his capacity to love was not there. But my mom wasn't there, so he had to deal with it, right? But my dad had, like, real concern. Like, he was just, my dad was a guy who was, like, dead, like, walking around and checked out and, no purpose, no goal, nothing. So anyways, there's these exit points that people have, early exit points, and there's people who are just walking corpses, who are, they're just lost souls, and people have them in their family. And this, my daughter Anna was like that in some ways. People who are, think about death quite a bit. People have suicidal tendencies, suicidal ideation. People are depressed. The depressed always goes with having no goal. Like you wake up, you don't have a purpose. You don't have some, reason for your existence. And then depression is a part of that. And, depression causes that, and having no goals causes depression, and, having no purpose, and, just the feelings that people have. And then all the things that go with that, right? So, there's people who you're not surprised that they die young. There's people who are, like I couldn't imagine my daughter having a life. Like I'm like, how could she sustain a relationship? How could she, sustain a job? She had all these authority issues. Like she could do things for like a couple weeks, and she was, she had a lot of enthusiasm at times, but she was just, so difficult. Like she was just so high maintenance, and she was always causing problems and complaining, and and just all of it. Like she had no consistency. She was violent, and she had all these issues. And my worry, when you have kids, your worry is like, how is this kid going to have a normal life? Like just all these issues. Of course, I mean, my family was not great. Like my family had some lots of issues there in terms of you know, I mean, I don't consider my family a highly functional group of people, right? So, but my ex's, mom had definitely mental issues, a lot of them, and her whole family had them. And, I mean, her dad was a perv, and I mean, just had sexually abused her, like, her whole story. And she had been institutionalized and tried to commit suicide, my ex, and she cut herself. She was a cutter. And they had inherited these behaviors. And so, that self abuse and all that stuff. And, like people go through things when they're young and have a wake up call. And for me, I was under functioning, and then I found Sahaj Marg. And so I, hoped that my daughter would have that. And she started to meditate for about a month and was doing better. And I could see it was helping her. But she didn't stick with it because she was young, 15, when that started. And then she just, continued on these behaviors, and she got into drugs. And I guess when she killed herself, she was like on LSD and was having a bad trip. And some moron she was so impulsive. She was the last person that should own a firearm, and somebody gave her a gun. And so, I mean, I don't know who would do such a thing. Like, I mean, obviously somebody who didn't know her, but you just don't give fucking somebody else a gun. I mean, if she didn't have that gun, then she'd still be alive, right? So, I mean, I'm not sure of all the details, but, but if it wasn't that, it might be something else, right? An accident or something. She was, she was a high risk person. She did things that were highly risked. She was a person that, did things that were, could have led to being hurt really badly or killed, just, one of those thrill kind of seeker persons too. So, you don't know what some scars are like. And then there's really higher developed souls that come down to do spiritual work. And Master Charji said, if they have a specific assignment, something they're supposed to accomplish on Earth, they don't want to hang around. They don't want to hang around and get trapped here, especially if they're like a liberated soul that doesn't have to incarnate. They're coming here by choice. And there was people that would, they would realize, all right, I'm done here. And they would just hold their breath until they died. They would just be able to, or something like that, right? Like they wouldn't commit suicide. They were just like, all right, it's time for me to leave. I've accomplished what I'm supposed to accomplish here, and they're eager to leave. They don't want to get enticed by the sensory stimulation here and get sucked into, the drama, which they're higher developed souls that came down here to do spiritual work, and then they get sucked into the drama and the bullshit that, people bring, and they lose their focus on God and their what they're supposed to do here. That happened to even Jesus to a certain extent. Like it's just people who are famous, and so it's easy to get distracted away from your true purpose. It's very there's a lot of bondage that can be created here. So there's all these things. These are the things that are need to be thought about in terms of the death process, because everyone thinks it's so bad, but some things are just not great about material life. You don't want to get bogged down in all those things, right? It's just and people, so higher developed souls and souls that are here for spiritual purpose, always have that risk. And then of course everyone else is mired down in the the grossness, the cesspit of human life, and they're just detached and coming in and reincarnating and do the same things over and over again without ever sort of getting free from their earthly bondage and moving to another level. Like most people are just, stuck in the matrix. And so that's just, unfortunate, but it's the way it is. That's the real tragedy, where there's no movement. And that for most people, I talk about this. I just did this in a video that's up today about the simple technique about asking God what to do. You can always ask God what to do. What is this about? What am I going through? Why am I going through this? Why is this happening? what is there for me to learn about, and just asking God questions. Anybody can ask God questions, and then you figure out your way of receiving the answer. Like, people can talk to God but don't know how to listen, and I talk about this extensively in the 199th edition of the Journey series, and then a voiceover that's on my video that's up. And today's Friday, June 13th. Probably should have said that at the beginning of the video. It's Friday the 13th, 2025. So I was talking about that in another, my last Journey series, and my the 199th edition of the Journey series, and then some of these other videos. But people can always ask God, and then finding a way to listen. This is the key to all these things, is being able to listen, because people will, beg God for stuff or talk to God, but they won't have any way to even ask questions, but won't find a way to receive the answers. And then have the confidence and faith to be able to receive the answers, and actually believe that they are answers coming from God. All right, so that's all I have to offer here. I'll be adding to this playlist the one on the Gratefullness meditation, and that a place that people can, go to when there's anything to do with the death and dying. And I also have a playlist on my Positive Future channel where I talked about a video I made that people can watch if I was to die. And I have a few videos in that too as well, that have, stuff about this stuff. Anyways,